Nashville Design Week is a platform for bold collaborations and conversations that promote idea sharing, engage and educate the public, and strengthen our city's design culture. We shine a spotlight on designers who are shaping the city's future and facilitate critical conversation about the industry's growth and impact.
2020 has challenged us in every way. A tornado, a pandemic, and a long overdue reckoning with racial inequity. And as we close in on a formative election, we are excited to focus on the power of design to reshape communities and to actively support equity. We are proud to introduce a diverse range of speakers covering everything from racial injustice and inequity to diversity and inclusion, connectivity, and allyship, all through the lens of design.
We are fortunate to partner with design leaders who are invested in the future of Nashville's design community. These leaders see Nashville Design Week as essential and support making design discourse accessible to all. Thank you endlessly to our 2020 sponsors for helping us bring Nashville Design Week to life. Thank you to founding silver sponsor, Hastings. Hastings is a boutique architecture and interior design firm of 75 professionals who are deeply committed to the service of clients, producing award-winning, thoughtful, and impactful architecture. Thank you to silver sponsor, Watkins College of Art and O'Moore College of Architecture and Design at Belmont University. The Watkins College of Art and the O'Moore College of Architecture and Design celebrate the power of art and design to transform people, communities, cultures, and the world. Thank you to our copper sponsors, Elevated Outcomes, Interface, Smith G Studio, and Textures Nashville. Thank you to our bronze sponsors, Aberdeen Studio, Alfred Williams & Company, Circa Creative Studios, Dade, EOA Architects, Earl Swenson Associates, and Manuel Zeitlin Architects.
And thank you to our media partners, Dezeen, Lightning 100, and Nashville Interiors, and to creative directors Lindsay and Alan Lassiter.
Nashville Design Week is proud to be a fiscally sponsored project of the Arts and Business Council of Greater Nashville, a nonprofit organization. Nashville Design Week is an entirely volunteer effort made possible by the tireless dedication of our team. Now, let's get started.
Thank you, Sarah. And greetings, everyone. As stated, my name is Edward Henley. I'm the principal and founder of Pillars Development here in Nashville, and I'm extremely excited for today's conversation and of course, moderating this panel. Design education and improving diversity are very important topics that I believe we would all agree. But the exposure and education are all aspects of land use development, are particular in the design disciplines, an area that I personally am passionate about, and I believe I can impact positively. All of that to say, I'd like to sincerely thank you all for being here and taking part in this event. Thank you to all those associated with Nashville's Design Week, also Austin's Design Week for this collaboration. And thank you to the wonderful team at EOA Architects for supporting and sponsoring this event. I believe that it is a manifestation of the mission of Nashville Design Week, which is to showcase design talent, unite our design community through collaboration, and to teach the public about the impact of design. With that, I would like to begin by introducing our wonderful panel. I'll start with Carl Settles. Carl is a visionary founder and executive director of E4 Youth, an Austin-based nonprofit organization that partners with local schools to provide innovative curriculum and support, career exposure, job shadowing, and internship opportunities to youth of all ages, 16 into their early 20s. He is also an architect of employability curriculum, which helps classroom educators build stronger relationships with students of color. More recently, Mr. Settles has developed VR Remix Party, an immersive storytelling curriculum, open source VR and AR tools and workflows that help students tell compelling stories about their lives in minutes, as part of the Intel Foundation's She Will Connect program, a great opportunity for many young students in the area. His latest venture, Austin Digital Heritage Project, trains and employs college-age youth that collect and curate oral stories into a digital archive that can be accessed via virtual and augmented reality tools. Carl, thank you for taking the time today, for doing what you do to engage the youth in your community in these ways. If I've missed anything and you'd like to say something briefly, please take this time to do so.
I'm just happy to be here. Thank you.
Thanks, Carl. Next, I'll introduce Alicia Moore. She is a service design strategist, creating the future of support at International Business Machines, better known as IBM, which is perennially a top 40 company in the Fortune 500. Ms. Moore is passionate about the intersection of design and social good, and she works to build community and a more equitable world. She is also the Design for Good director on the American Institute for Graphic Arts board in Austin. Alicia, thank you for your service to your community. And is there anything you would like to add that I didn't mention this morning?
No, Ed, this was great. Really happy to be here, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. I'll now introduce Marlene Davis. Marlene is a distinguished professor of the University of Tennessee, my alma mater, and serves as dean and has served as dean of the university's College of Architecture and Design for nearly a decade. Marlene has made many significant contributions in impacting the educational experience of thousands of students. Marlene Davis has a deep passion for introducing students to the range of complexities of architecture. And it is her signature course, Architecture 101, and in design studios at all levels. She works within a pedagogical tradition that develops design thinking that is simultaneously analytical and creative. And I will say that it is one of the best colleges for architecture in the nation, and largely due to Marlene's work for over a decade. Marlene, is there anything you would like to add?
Thank you, Ed. I thought I would add one thing that might have bearing on our discussion today, is that I have served as the national president for the Association of Collegiate Schools of Architecture. So in that role, which essentially was a 3-year leadership ladder, I had the opportunity to be in different kind of AIA meetings and meetings with allied disciplines as we nationally tried to address a lot of the challenges that face all the design disciplines.
Last, and certainly not least, is Jill Romano. Jill joined ESA Architects, a firm here in Nashville, in 2014. She has over 16 years of experience managing design and construction projects for healthcare clients across the country. Jill has been involved in ACE Mentor program of Greater Nashville for 14 years, including 9 years as a team leader and now a board chair. For those of you who may not know, the ACE Mentor program of Nashville, Tennessee, it introduces high school students to exciting careers in architectural, construction, and management, and engineering professions. It supports their higher education goals through merit-based scholarships, programs that were started in 2002 with 40 students in 3 schools, has grown over the years. The students were organized into 3 teams and mentored by professionals from 15 different firms. They now reach 130 students each year, with over 100 dedicated professionals mentoring those students, representing 18 schools, and are approaching nearly $1 million in scholarship funds, and has been awarded to Middle Tennessee students since the affiliate was founded. So Jill, thank you for that work, great work. I'm actually familiar with the ACE program myself, and I would like to offer you the time to add anything as well if I didn't mention it.
Sure, yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you for having me. The only other thing I'll add is that ACE Mentor is actually a national program. It's not just in Nashville. 2002 is when the Nashville affiliate was started. We are in the top 20 affiliates in the country in terms of student participation, scholarships awarded. There is an affiliate in Austin. I know we have a partnership with Austin Design Week, so there is an ACE Mentor in Austin, Texas as well. So yeah, we're just excited to be here and be around the country and giving out a lot of scholarship money.
Well, thanks for that, Jill. And I think you appropriately made that connection. You know, I've recently visited Austin, and definitely cities with kindred spirits, right, to Nashville and sister cities. But I'd like to start with the folks in Austin. And I'll start with you, Carl. I'll introduce you first. Would you tell us a little bit how E4 Youth was formed, and what it's done and how it's grown to serve disadvantaged youth in the city of Austin?
Sure. What is now E4U started really 13 years ago. A big part of my motivation for starting E4Youth was that I'm a second generation college graduate. My dad had a PhD, my mother had a master's degree, but I didn't know I could be creative and be anything other than a musician until I got in my 30s. And that's when I discovered advertising. And so there's such a dearth of us people of color in these fields. We don't even know that they exist. So that was a big thrust behind why I started E for Youth. We've evolved over time. We had to stop trying to be everything to everybody. Frankly, if a kid of color says they want to be an engineer, everybody gets happy and there's all sorts of opportunities. But if they want to draw, they want to make movies, people don't indulge them while other kids are indulged all the time. And so that's a natural systematic disenfranchisement that just kind of chaps away at our youth. And our economy is being driven by creativity. It's a creative economy. And so E for Youth started first as the Media Diversity Council, then the Media Communications Council, and then it became E for Youth. And it's really a part of a journey that I had to come to, is that creative kids are ignored. And creative kids without resources, we're reaching a tipping point where kids can't afford to be creative. And that has all sorts of deleterious effects. And frankly, it was really difficult for me to get started. I luckily developed relationships with several folks that run advertising agencies here in town, and they essentially bankrolled me at a minimal level to get this thing started. And it's been a journey, but you also have to understand that Austin, which is kind of known as this liberal place in the middle of Texas, is also the most economically segregated city in the US. So there's a huge dichotomy between perception and reality about what's going on, and a lot of virtue signaling and not a lot of work being put on the ground. So I don't know. I'm gonna get too deep into that, but we started, we've grown, and our approach is really, how do you build an ecosystem where creative youth can find out about these careers, also develop relationships, and with near peers or college students that are into those things, and then also connect to professionals. Now I'll leave it there for now.
No, I appreciate that, Carl. And I think you did a great job highlighting, how a lot of times, I say this phrase often, how dreams are siloed, right? You oftentimes encourage kids to dream big, right? You can be anything you want to be. But what happens along the way is you start to chip away at that promise that you made to kids, right? They could be
Right.
anything they want. And I think it's unfortunate that we do that. And I'm happy that what you've done is develop a program that starts to reopen those doors and reopen all the opportunity that has been chipped away as a child has aged throughout their teenage years. Jill, in contrast, I'll turn to you. One, of course, tell me how you got engaged with the ACE Mentor program. But two, kind of going off of what Carl said and about the creative side, also talk about the importance of matching that and mirroring that with the technical skills as we talk about architecture, engineering, and construction management.
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from University of Tennessee College of Architecture and Design in 2004. And pretty much right away, when I went to work, the firm that I went to work with, they told us, they said, architecture is not a spectator sport. We expect you to get involved. So ACE was one of the programs that the firm that I went to work for was already supporting. So immediately I just jumped in and started helping mentor the team that we were involved in, which at that time was one of the teams in Williamson County, south of Nashville, which is the wealthiest county in the state of Tennessee, right? We had a lot of private school students. So we really didn't have many barriers there with those students, right? They had transportation, they had access to technology without an issue. I came to work for ESA in 2014, and ESA also involved in ACE, which was great. So I could easily continue that involvement with their support. But ESA was involved with Glencliff High School here in Nashville, which is one of the lower socioeconomic. It has a lot of undocumented students, a lot of immigrant students, a lot of English as second language students. And so the contrast to me was really, really striking of, you have these same really bright, really motivated kids that you work with, and you just think, God, you can change the world if you want to. But the barriers that they faced in terms of technology, in terms of transportation, were just astounding and a little shocking to me. I think I went into it pretty naive. And the reality is that ACE was founded on the mission nationally to really target minority students and students of a lower socioeconomic status and give them access to careers in what has always been seen as a pretty white, pretty privileged industry. And so I was really appreciative personally to have that experience of the contrast, right, of working with the super wealthy private school kids versus the, undocumented immigrant student who really can't participate in an after school program because they have a job and they have to help support their family. So it opened my eyes to a lot of the socioeconomic barriers that they face that really, I think, are a result of systemic racism. And how do we overcome those, right? If we are an after school program and we don't have students showing up, well, what's the why behind that? The why is they can't do after school stuff. They've got jobs, they have to support their families. So in 2 schools here in Nashville, we have actually made ACE a class during the day, during the school day. So we got the curriculum approved by the state of Tennessee, and it was amazing. At Glencliff, we almost lost our ACE team because there was such low participation, but just that one shift of switching it to during the day, now there's a waiting list to get in, right? So identifying the why behind those barriers, I think, has been really important for us, and trying to just make sure that we really are affording them pretty much every opportunity that we're able to, and leveling the playing field a little bit, so that, like you said, if the dreams are chipped away, what can we do to help bring that back and say, if you're interested in this, we want to support you, because these kids are amazing. I've been blown away by them, by the drive that they have and all the burdens that some of them have to deal with, and they're able to do their schoolwork and get scholarships on top of that. It's incredible. It's really incredible.
No, Jill, thanks for sharing that. And I think, again, it just speaks to one, the amount of effort and work that needs to be done in the ways that we can do that and create, impactful change. Like you said, having a program that was on the fringes of being eliminated because of not having, much, what seemed to not be much interest, to then making a shift, and now there's a waiting list. It also reminds me of another program that started here in Nashville with the Civic Design Center, which is Design Your Neighborhood. And it kind of has that same process. It's worked its way into the school system and really now created a pathway for everyone to get involved, particularly students who don't always have the same opportunities that others may have. I'll keep working my way through the panel because I love what you teed up there, Jill. And Marlene, I'll go to you next. I think we've heard from Carl, we've heard from Jill about what's being done, how we're engaging youth, how we're exposing them to things that they may not have been in what would seem a more traditional fashion. But you, as someone who's been in the College of Architecture at the University of Tennessee for a while, what has been the result of those types of efforts, right? What have you noticed? What types of trends as relates to diversity and the student body makeup going specifically into that college over the past few years? Is there a trend you've noticed, I guess, and if so, what is it?
Okay, I just wanted to answer that a little bit in 2 contexts. One, since I've been in education for 30 years plus, over that long period of time and nationally, there's been one big improvement in diversity, and that probably is with regards to the female enrollment. 30 years ago, barely 10% of students would be female. And today, 20 years ago, 15 years ago, it began to move towards 50-50%, both undergrads, both grads, almost all parts of the country. That's been a remarkable change in architecture, which is also true in medicine, in law, but actually not in engineering. That's interesting to me. At UT specifically, oh yes, we've been 50% female almost for the last 20 years. Definitely parity there. Our African American enrollment has never been high. It's increased maybe moderately. Some years higher, some years lower, but not significantly. And that's not for lack of trying, I can definitely say. What has changed, I would say, at UT, College of Architecture and Design, is that you would consider it a much more, I have seen much more multi-ethnic profiles of students. We have Asian Americans, Muslim Americans, Mexican Americans. You can't, these are not international students. We just see a lot of diversity in the student body overall. So I would say that's noticeably different than, say, 20 years ago.
No, thanks. I appreciate that, Marlene. And Alicia, I'm coming to you next. I think and I think Marlene did a great job of really looking at these in two sectors, right? You have the gender, right, in category where you have women versus male students, and then you also have people of color and the diversity related to ethnicity. Clearly, checking both of those boxes, I want to ask you, what was your journey like to get to where you are, right? I mean, and kind of some of the stages, right? Where was the inspiration to have a career in design, mm-hmm. and then what was the path like to get to where you are today, working with IBM?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. My path to design was not traditional. I didn't go to a fancy art school. I grew up, my dad was an engineer, and the idea of going to art school never even crossed my mind because nobody was going to pay for that. I think for my parents, they were definitely thinking about like what most people of color parents think about: engineer, doctor, lawyer. My parents never pushed me in a direction. They were totally open to whatever I wanted to do. But it took me a while to figure that out. It wasn't until I actually went back to school for design at a small community college here. It's not small, I guess, anymore, but a community college here in Austin Community College, that I really started to think about, like, what is it that I wanted to do with my life? My background is actually public relations and mass communication. So I had to go back to school. And I knew, for me personally, I love design and I love the work, but I wasn't willing to sacrifice all the money associated with getting that type of education. So that's why I went to a community college. And after I graduated, I immediately started working in advertising. And for me personally, I started off as a production artist, like really just understanding file management, organization, sitting in on really big accounts to really learn, like, what is the lingo that goes on. And I started to move up to junior designer and then senior designer. And then finally I was like, okay, this is good, but it's not enough. And so I really started to look at companies and organizations that were kind of pushing the limits of design at the time. And IBM just happened to be one of those companies that was introducing like design languages, introducing designers to product and service teams that are really complex. I mean, the products that IBM provides are not simple or easy to use products. You're talking about mainframes and servers and support, and that was really the appeal to me, was like, where can I combine design but also getting that challenging work environment that I needed and wanted. And I definitely found it at IBM. And for me personally, it's been a really good growth opportunity, not only in really refining my design skills, but really refining my problem solving skills. How can you tie what the business needs are with your design skill set? So for me, it's been a great and interesting journey. And I'm really happy that I did it.
Well, that's great. I think you touched on a piece that's going to become, I think, recurring a theme throughout our discussion, and that's the education, right? You decided to seek further education to enter into this field, and you took, like you said, maybe a non-traditional path with that. But I'd like to bounce back to Marlene because again, I think one of the things that we're talking about in design, and unfortunately, and I may be wrong in this, but just my perception is one of the things that is a perceived barrier for design, while creatives are able to enter workforce and industry in so many ways. And of course, in today's time, it's a lot more non-traditional methods for doing that. But when I think about most design professionals, most different types of industry professionals in the multitude of designs, they all require some type of collegiate degree, right? Some type of university, even if it's an accredited program that may not be at a university, but there is some specific type of education and learning. Marlene, when just in that context, what are the things that you think you've seen as the student population when we talk about students of color and their level of preparation going into the university, and then also what the university has done to reach out and recruit more students of color?
Yeah, it's architecture is definitely a profession that is really pretty narrowly defined, and you really have to get to that collegiate environment. And I know that a lot of talk has been addressed to developing the pipeline so that you recruit younger and younger and reach down as far to young people to influence them to think about these other fields of action and then to prepare themselves in high school. And in fact, everything we've heard about, Carl's program is all about bringing this message to the youth. Alicia said she didn't even think about this as a child. And ACE, that's its mission, is to go to young people. I mean, I am glad you mentioned Design Your Neighborhood, because that is really an exciting development. Nationwide, there are many people who say, "Oh, let's bring some curriculum into middle schools," and it might be a course or two, or it might get a little bit of a grant from the AIA and run it for a few years. I know there's a great program in Chicago for all the schools. Nashville, this is a great success story with this Design Your Neighborhood. It started with I know the student, Melody Gibson, graduated in a recession, went to Teach for America, came back to Nashville Civic Design Center, and suddenly she's able to combine passions, education and architecture. Started with a 2-week summer camp and then grew longer, had more students, and now I believe she has a structured curriculum in 20 schools in Nashville with 3,000 students a year. And then there's a high school component. There are internships at Nashville Civic Design Center. And here at University of Tennessee, we see that pipeline working. We see the ACE pipeline working. And whenever you can't do this in 2 years. You really do have to nurture that. I know that people might be interested in, how do you recruit students? You can't wait till they're 18. You can't wait for them to transfer from community college. And it's hard because we have to go to high schools and whatnot. But reaching out to magnet schools, finding these kind of special programs and developing relationships are really quite important. I'd say another thing that's very important is once we have a student in the university environment, we want to make that student successful. And it's important we've had National Organization of Minority Architects, organizations, role models, make sure when we invite visitors, the visitors we invite to the school represent a good cross-section of role models for young people. In Knoxville, I'm happy to say the current dean started an ACE chapter, which will be very important here. but we started a summer design camp and then solicited scholarships to help fund students who couldn't, to be able to come to this design camp for that kind of exposure. And then, of course, scholarships are always very, very important because higher education is expensive. I want to also say for our students to send the message that to value diversity in classes, in design studios that embrace neighborhoods, embrace educational opportunities. It depends on the faculty, and we've had all kinds of different efforts in the university that makes us better, makes us a richer place for students to be.
No, that's great. And I think you're right. I mean, I like how you touched on a lot of things, and it is really, I think, understanding the place of a collegiate degree and accreditation to an individual for this profession, and understanding that means that you are definitely clearly and intrinsically stuck in the pipeline and have a role to play to reach down and recruit youth and bring them up. And I appreciate you highlighting that. And I think you also did a really good job highlighting that it needs to be done with partners. It needs to be done with different individuals as well as institutions. So, Carl, I've kept you quiet for a while. I want to reach back to you because I think Marlene teed this up very well. She mentioned was having professionals that represent those professions. And a key part of what you've done is integrated job shadowing and internship opportunities. I want to ask you about that. How has that changed, I guess, the excitement level, the dedication of students, right? Being able to see what you want, right? Being able to reach out and touch and say, oh, okay, after I go through these next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 years of my life, here's what the other end looks like. And I'll be able to do these types of things. And really having that validation for your dreams, right? For your goals, that right. It is, you are on a certain path.
Well, I'll also say this is that most students, maybe not most, but many, can't tell you what they like or what they're interested in. That's the biggest problem. Okay. And frankly, I'd say probably about 60% of the students that I asked that question to have never been asked by an adult what it is they'd like to do or what it is they're good at. So that's a huge problem. What our focus is, I talked about a peer, near peer, and professional model, is we actually go out and recruit college age youth, whether they're in college or not. And we say, look, we'll pay you $250 a semester just to get your shit together. Okay. So for you to build a portfolio, you to learn how to interact with other people, be a part of a community, and then we'll start to pay you at $12 an hour. And our strategic approach in terms of getting this down into younger students is that we align ourselves with career and technical education teachers, because those are the subject areas that are most closely aligned with jobs in the creative economy. But there's a total disconnect for the students about those career and technical education classes and what the implications are for them in terms of a career. So we sit down with the teacher and we say, okay, what are your needs and what are your goals? And then we custom match them with a college student in our pool that then leads their enrichment club. Also, to what Jill was talking about, is that many of our clubs are during school, and those are the most successful ones because you're competing with so many other things. And I think it's also for teachers, we don't want to do this to teachers. We want to work with teachers, right? So we're not trying to get another thing for them to do. We're saying, tell us what you want, and we're going to bring somebody in that's going to do that really for you and support you. So the idea for us is to help kids unpack. The 4 E's are engage, educate, employ, and empower. So first of all, you got to know what it is that you like to do. And then we say, okay, now this is what you like to do. This is how you can use that. We're going to educate you on how you can use that to develop a digital portfolio. And then based on that portfolio, that is when we provide these internship and job shadow opportunities where they get to work on projects, real companies, real clients. And so we have high school and college students that have done campaigns for Southwest Airlines or for Lyft or for Whataburger. And now those students many of them became creative mentors that were college students going back into the high school, and now they're moving into top advertising agencies like VML Y&R or GSD&M, which is the largest ad agency in this area of Texas. So it helps. I guess what I'm saying is that if kids don't feel seen, because the fundamental problem is that kids of color in particular do not feel seen or heard. And they're not indulged. Okay. And so to do that based on what they say that they want, and then provide them with opportunities that show them glimpses. And it doesn't have to be the ultimate thing that they want to do, but that the fact that they were indulged and then they were able to take that someplace and be able to experience what that's like, whether that's what they ultimately end up doing or not, that's all cultural capital that drives them forward. And they start to discover other things like, oh, I didn't know what strategy was. Many of our journalism majors end up going into advertising. So they didn't know about advertising until they got into the program. So it's definitely about exposure. It's also about that groundwork and the relationships. It's not transactional, it's relational. And that's really the secret sauce for what we do. And I would imagine with Design Your Neighborhood, that's probably why that works, right? Because they're doing something that they can actually relate to. It's their neighborhood. So I'll stop there.
No, Carl, I think you did a great job, and you actually answered one of my I guess would have been a follow-up question, but you talked about how there is actually tangible progression from this program into professions. I think that's really important, right? We're being able to see these results. And you highlighted something else that talked about the engagement from those who have gone through a program and how you worked with professionals in these areas to engage people in this age group. And also providing an incentive, right? And then structuring it for them to succeed. I feel like all of those things are really important. And Jill, I think this is where I want to look to you next. Is you have been involved with ACE for some time, and I think a lot of those things and topics that were mentioned by Carl are present in ACE. And I want to ask you particularly about the engagement from an individual level, right, as well as a firm. I look at our audience makeup in the response to this poll, and we have designers that make up about 80% of that. We have educators, right? The two parties that Carl just mentioned working together. And then we have students, right? We have students and then the community members. And those are who we want to impact and we want to empower. And so would you highlight, exactly how ACE does it at least, and what you find most successful in that partnership and that pairing between a firm and an individual and actually working with the school system and students?
Yeah, sure. So the way that ACE in general nationally is structured is each affiliate is divided up into teams. So here in Nashville, we have 10 teams. Some teams are just one school. Some teams are a combination of different schools that make up the students that make up that team. It is integral that we have buy-in from the schools on this, right? So like we have the CTE coordinators for both Williamson County Schools and Metro Nashville Public Schools sit on our board of ACE, and they are the contacts for us to reach out to the individual schools and the teachers, because they're the ones that can help us identify the students that might be interested in our program, or this student may really have a talent for this, or and that's really how we recruit students for the different teams. In terms of firm and mentor involvement, we were very lucky when ACE started in Nashville, that one of the first firms to buy into it was HCA. And HCA has a huge initiative for reaching out to minority students. They sponsored several ACE scholarships over the years that are just geared towards minority students. And HCA in Nashville, as we are all aware, has a massive reach. And so HCA, the bigwigs in design and construction at HCA were able to go then to all these firms that they worked with and say, we would like you to participate in this. And so they did. And, Nashville's program has been around long enough now that we have seen it work. We have students that have been through the program that have won scholarships, students that haven't won scholarships but went through the program, went on and continued their education in architecture, engineering, construction management. Now, 2 of them sit on our board. They're back in their board members, they're team leaders, they're mentors. So that helps us market it to get, keep it going. It kind of snowballs from there. The firm support is super, super important. Obviously, the easiest thing that they can do is write a check, because our mission is to give scholarships to these students so that they can go on. I've seen some chat in the comments that architecture is a really expensive profession. The education for it is, and it is. I went to an accredited program. I am a licensed architect, but that path is not realistic for a lot of people. And so one of the things that ACE National is really pushing for is to say, hey, that's not the only way that you can be involved in this industry. There are other paths. There's a huge push right now for trade programs. We have dedicated national scholarships available for students that don't want to take the traditional university path and would really rather go through a trade program or an apprenticeship and start working right away. So that's a huge focus of National. National is also very committed to the pipeline discussion that we were having earlier. And a lot of these major national corporations have representatives on the ACE national board. Turner, Skanska, huge national corporations, and they have committed that they will not only have job shadows and internships for college students, but going earlier, they are going to provide those opportunities for high school students. So I think it kind of trickles down, right? We have the national support, and then on the local level as affiliates see that and get involved. The other way that is a huge support to us is just firms allowing their employees and giving them the time and space to mentor. I know at ESA we have a job number assigned to it, and so if you take time, during your day to go mentor and work on ACE, you bill that time to the ACE job number, and we can track it that way. So it's not like you have to make up your time later, if you're leaving during the day or something like that. And just that permission, especially to your younger employees, is vital, right? Because when you're right out of college, you might not have the confidence to go and ask and say, hey, this is something that means a lot to me and I want to do it. You might have that little bit of fear, right? To ask your boss for the time off to go do it. So that permission from firms is just honestly the best thing you can do, because our mentor population currently is primarily white and primarily men. And so we really want more diverse mentors, and that is changing, right, as the pipeline changes. But especially getting younger employees involved in the mentorship part and firms giving them the permission to do that it's just going to be critical to change it, because I think that the students can relate to it better. I know we try to find employees that, at ESA, some of our rockstar employees did not take a traditional path, right? They might be detailers that graduated from Nashville State. And so I'm like, hey, can we get you in front of the kids? Like, let's let you talk to them. I know one of our most successful meetings was one of the contractor firms that we partnered with brought in a superintendent from the field who never went to college. He started out as a laborer, worked his way up, and man, those kids locked onto him. And they just wanted to know everything about him. How did he get to where he was? So it's vitally important that we diversify our mentor population, because then that is going to encourage the students, right? When they see someone who looks like them, being successful in their career, it's only going to get better from there.
No, I appreciate that, and I think you hit on a lot of things there, but I think you're absolutely right. I'm a big advocate for mentoring. And I think it is just a natural barrier sometimes to be able to engage someone that you just perceive to have so many differences with. And the more and more that you can find commonalities, I think it jumps back to what Carl said. Then you just get exposed to more and more things, and you start to feel more comfortable. And the next thing you know, you have this whole new world open to you. Well, I do want to do this. I want to make sure I compliment Sheila and all the folks at Nashville Design Week for putting this panel together, because I'm finding it so easy to like navigate and weave through you all these common threads. Alicia, I'd like to turn to you because a couple of things that came up while Jill was talking. She mentioned two things. One, she talked about the path, right, and how really, navigating that and seeing that in somewhat of a non-traditional fashion. And you highlighted that in your own words earlier. But then also thinking about what you said earlier too about the brand and understanding, kind of developing that. I saw IBM as a place that was at this position for what I wanted to do and the attractiveness of a firm. And the reason I'm asking that is because we've talked about these programs and we're talking about this quote unquote pipeline, and we're talking about the barriers, but also getting them to the level of education that they need. But I'd like for you to lean in a little bit and talk about actually the job, right? Actually being a design professional. And then the importance of seeing yourself in a place, right? Firms, what they do to make themselves attractive.
Yeah, I mean, the job is complex in the sense that, it's completely different than the type of work that I was doing in advertising. And that's because you're working with enterprise software. I mean, and that just saying those words alone is just like, it's like a web, and I look at my job every day as like peeling back an onion and exposing certain things that are going on. And we tend to focus a lot on our customer needs. Like as a business, are we as a business making it complicated for our own users to use our products? The answer is yes, but you have to be, and that's why there's so many different facets of design, right? Because we solve different types of problems. You have the advertising and the graphic design problems, you have the enterprise product problems, you have other product designers, industrial design. And so you have to kind of sit with that and really think about, like, what kind of designer do I want to be? And what are my career goals? What am I striving for? I quickly found out for me, like seeing my work in publications, magazines, and billboards, it's cool for like the first 5 times that you see that. And then after a while, you're like, okay, I need something. For me personally, I needed something else. And so when I looked at IBM, I always tell people the work we do is not sexy. Like you're not going to walk at Times Square and see something that you created unless you're on the advertising and marketing side of IBM. But if you sit on a product team or a service team, you are really trying to help this business troubleshoot and resolve these really complex issues. So I knew that IBM was a large company, and I knew that the problems would be large and vast. But I also knew as a designer who wanted to continue to grow and develop, I would have to continue to educate myself. Like your education doesn't stop when you leave school, right? Your education continues, and you get more refined at things. So now for me personally, although I am working more, even though I feel like my UX and visual skills are refined, what I'm working on now is my communication skills, my collaboration skills. How do you work with very technical people who don't understand design, but also designers who don't understand technical people? So for me, the education is constantly evolving, and that's something that I really craved as a designer, because I can learn a new platform. I can go from Adobe to Sketch and apps. All that stuff is cool. But at the end of the day, I also want to grow as a human, as an individual. And IBM has given me that opportunity to do so.
No, that I think that's a great way to describe the many different possibilities with just one area of design, right? And stepping into that. I will say this as we continue through our discussion. I want to make sure that the audience and those that are engaged feel free to utilize the Q&A function, because we will have a time as we reach the latter part of our presentation today for a Q&A session. And then also, of course, to use social media to discuss on the platform. I'm sure there'll be some hashtags that may already be or will soon be dropped in the chat, so you can do that. But one of the things that I was thinking about, Alicia, as you were talking, and you mentioned the complexity and the different types of opportunities that you have, and that continuous learning. I wanted to reach back to Marlene as we talk about architecture and we think outside the box, right? We've talked about how it is a very structured program and a very structured way that you must go through that program to become an architect. But what types of things are being created to adjust with the ever-evolving world, the more technological world now? And it's going to be a two-parter, Marlene, so bear with me. So what type of programs are you guys really rolling out that are kind of looking towards the future of architecture? And then two, building off of what Alicia said, those communication skills, right? Being very technically driven as a profession, but understanding that part of what design is about is really being creative and being able to take what people see in their brains, right? And then be able to bring it into real life and animate that and create it. So a two-parter, sorry for loading you up, but I just wanted to ask you that programs, and then what type of things relates to communication and interacting with people that may not have those technical skills.
Well, that's not so easy to answer because there's so many different programs and so many different things. In architecture, it is, on the one hand, it's very structured. On the other hand, I used to say we were like a micro university because we had the engineers, we had the historians, we had the designers, sitting around our little faculty. We were, PhD historians, engineers, all in one faculty. The same thing about the students. They're all so different and they naturally gravitate in different directions, sometimes towards the hands-on stuff, sometimes towards the digital stuff, sometimes towards the visionary visionary things, urban design things, more the construction execution of things. And I think that's nationwide. And a lot of times we feel handcuffed by accreditation. For example, there was this mandate, you must provide innovation. And it's like, how do you, it was like, yes, we could provide innovation if we didn't have this checklist of all these other skills that you want us, you must have a business class, you must have this, you must have that. Actually just give us time. And I think Alicia said, just time to explore. But having said that about architecture programs, I just do want to cycle back for everybody. It might sound odd as a college educator. I wish we did not define success as a college degree. I think we should define success as a gratifying career, a career that makes a difference. And I think there's no better way to show that than the whole construction industry. That's why ACE is such a good organization. The crazy architects with their artistic bent, the engineers. And if you think our curriculum is packed, that's a real congested curriculum. But construction, and you can have such a wonderful, there's so many opportunities. And you need some training, but you don't need the college degree. So I think that's just vitally important so that a young person doesn't feel like a failure, that they dropped out, that they slid into something else. That's an important message we should give.
No, I appreciate that, Marlene. It resonates with me personally. I tell people, I went to UT Nashville with the intent of being a mechanical engineer. And I found out pretty quickly that that wasn't the path for me. But you're right. I mean, you think about those programs being very intense, and you talk about students coming, particularly students of color, a lot of times from inner city schools. Jill highlighted it perfectly. Just seeing the two worlds that some students really live in their teenage lives, and really the preparation for what's next in their life looks completely different. I wanted to turn back to you, Jill, because as we talk about that, and I think Marlene said something, having a college degree not necessarily defines success, but when you think about ACE and it opening up people to all of these different avenues, what do you think, and you talked about having a superintendent there, what do you think has been some of the most involved and engaged types of programs and things that have worked that really resonated with the students? And then how do you think that leads ACE's growth for the next 5-10 years?
Yeah, sure. By far, the most successful sessions are when you're doing anything hands-on, right? So some examples are we have had students come up with their own concrete mix design, mix the concrete, make cylinders. Then we took them to PSI and we broke them and had a competition, right, for who had the strongest concrete mix. On the architecture side, it's as simple as, we come up with really simple design charrettes with things like dried pasta and marshmallows and pretzels, and have them create forms and spaces. Those are obviously the most successful. The challenge that has been revealed to us within the past 9 months with COVID is so much of what we do is hands-on, that this year we are being mandated currently to go all virtual. So we are trying to figure out how do we translate that in a virtual learning environment. Here locally in Nashville, we've actually chosen to delay the start of our program to January. We typically start in mid-September. We just felt like the students here locally and teachers had enough on their plate without worrying about how to do our program as well. But I'm excited to see what we come up with, because National has come up with some really interesting curriculum ideas that we're going to try and implement. We're talking with other affiliates to see how they've done it. We've also seen some benefits to going virtual, right? Like in April, when we give out scholarships, we normally have a big in-person end of the year banquet. We were not able to do that this year. So instead, we set up Zoom calls with our scholarship winners. We didn't tell them that they won. We surprised them. We said, we're filming a marketing video about ACE. Like, can you just talk about your experience? And we had them and their families on the call, as well as their mentors, board members, and we were able to surprise them individually with scholarships, which was really nice to get to talk to them individually and hear what their plans are. Some were already enrolled in programs. We don't get to do that at a banquet when we're on stage handing them a big phone check, which is nice, but it showed us that we really like the personal side of it too. So I'm excited to see what we learn by being forced to go virtual, that we can then carry forward, maybe when we can meet in person again. So, but yeah, by far hands-on is for sure the most successful. We do a lot of construction site visits. Those are always fun. The kids love going on construction sites. They usually think it's the coolest thing, especially if it's like a big notable project, here in town, something downtown that everyone knows what it is. They get really excited, and it's fun to see them light up. And I think it kind of ignites that passion in them, like, oh, this is so cool. Like, could I be a part of this someday? And so we just want to show them, yes, you can. And you don't have to have a 4-year degree or a 5-year degree. You can go start working as an electrician right now, So, yeah, it's just opening those doors and showing, but by far, it's just bringing them on job sites, doing hands-on activities, and developing the mentoring relationships too, and letting them know, hey, you can reach out to me anytime with questions. We want to share our stories with them, and then maybe that ignites something in them that says, oh, well, maybe, I'm interested in UT. Let me email Jill and ask her about that. So we found all of that to be it's a combination of things. It's not necessarily one item. It's all of it working together.
No, that's great. And a lot of stuff that you said spoke to me. I mean, I'm a product of, having seen, observed, went on construction sites in my youth. And again, it kind of led me on the path that I wanted to be on. And I would not be deterred, and I found a way back. into the construction world and land use development. And really, like you said, there's nothing like being that awe-inspiring moment of saying, oh, this was nothing or was something else. You guys are working on it and making it this new thing, and then seeing that final product. I mean, to me, that's one of the greatest joys that I experience. And so I'm sure it has a great impact on many, many lives, and you guys exposing students to that is great. Again, you said a lot of things, and I think one of them that's really important to touch on is just dealing with the current environment around, having to be socially distant, having to think about ways to engage in the learning environment in this new setting. But I want to reach out to you, Carl, on this one. You already have been working on a program that has a lot to do with virtual reality, augmented reality. And one, I want you to just give us some details, expand on that. But then also, has that been impacted just in how you're rolling that out due to the way, 2020 has went with with all of the blows that continue to keep coming this year, but particularly around social distancing?
Obviously, previously, we've been doing this virtual reality stuff for the past 3 years. But most all of the instruction was done in person. Our virtual reality stuff is interesting because we've been working with, primarily as we develop the curriculum, we work with college students. And now, over the last 2 years, we've started to provide training to sister organizations that work with youth of all ages, so ages 6 to 24. Just a little bit about VR Remix Party is what we call the curriculum. It's basically a way to use a web browser to create immersive experiences about any location in the world. The most basic workflow that we do is we start with folks to think of a place that's significant to them. They go there on Google Maps, then they go into Street View. So they're actually virtually in that place. And then we teach them a hack that allows them to snap that 360 image, and that's their first asset. Okay. And then they record themselves talking about that place. They take both of those files, they upload them to a folder, and they copy the URLs of those files and place them into code and hit show. So suddenly they have an immersive story about a place that's familiar to them. Now the content might suck, but it's start, right? Because then we have a rubric, we start to look at the content production design, but the idea is to, first of all, them have some immediate success. And the great thing is that it creates this canvas or this sandbox where we can work with 6-year-old kids and engineers, and they can all come together and do something that's meaningful. So ultimately what we're doing is we're establishing multi-generational storytelling squads. And the idea is that history hides in plain sight. So if you look at it, I don't know what things are like in Nashville, but Austin is being hella gentrified, okay? And so when you go to a street corner, you see all these condos. Well, what used to be there? Right? And so we're using those tools. And again, it's a sandbox for creative kids. Maybe they want to do poetry. Okay, you write a poem about it, right? I want to design something. Okay, that's a visual element. You can put that in there. I'm into the programming part of it. Okay, well, let's look at how we can create a new feature set that goes within this template. And so this is something that we're all working together with our partners. And we do have a prototype up of this platform and some baseline experiences. But the idea is that we now have a portal that allows us an engine for communities to tell stories and collect oral histories about their cities, really at an infinite level. And so I guess that's a long aside to say is that we've had success being able to get 8-year-old girls be able to do VR remixes in 20 minutes, right? And so what we're trying to do is create in this especially in this virtual world, is that we've taken our college program, which we now call our Creative Leadership Academy. It's all virtual for us now. And what we're doing is we're actually starting to establish and take students outside of Austin that are college students that are part of the program. And as we continue to level them up and get them in geographic locations, and we're also expanding our partners at a national level, we're going to be able to instantiate physical programs in those respective cities. And the idea of building this pipeline of college students into these companies, and also having those college students go down into the high schools and cultivate talent, that's ultimately how we build the pipeline. So, I guess with any adversity, there come opportunities. And this opportunity has availed itself to us. And also, we are now starting to be seen as a go-to resource of how do you integrate digital literacy, cultural literacy skills into any classroom. And so that's become something that's really powerful. And we're trying to take these skills, this digital and cultural literacy skills, and impart them down to students way down in the pipeline, so that when they come to us, they've already have those requisite skills. So I'll shut up there. You seem to be muted. And we're not hearing you.
We good now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that.
No worries.
So I think, Carl, you mentioned something to me I think is really important, and talked about, just the change in the world, virtual reality, how you're able to interact, and you're able to interact in your environment, right? So you don't have to have one location. You're able to interact and you're able to take part in your built environment around you. Marlene, I wanted to ask, and Jill touched on this, the challenges of schooling in this fall semester, and really the challenges there. But Marlene, are you able to touch on what that's like at the collegiate level? And then also, is there VR and augmented reality things that are being rolled out at the collegiate level? I know, that wasn't really part of curriculum when I was in school, unfortunately, but I'm sure that there are a lot of students that are excited about that and really would like to have that be something that they're groomed for as they enter the professional field.
Well, with regard to online learning, it's not easy for anyone. And certainly my heart goes out to all the young parents who have to suddenly be in charge of education at home and partnering with the teachers in the whole K through 12 world. My sister's an art teacher in middle school, and what a challenge. I feel University of Tennessee, truly, actually, we've been blessed. The university's been very supportive for the faculty we've had all kinds of apps, lots of software, things to help us do things as best we can. I think smaller schools, maybe not so much. With regard to an architecture program, college students, well, we're also lucky. I mean, these students are just naturally very digital. And so everything has slid towards digital and digital models, digital design. We've been able to advance a design agenda through digital means. One thing we did that was slightly different was our first year program. We did make it mandatory for them to be on campus, or we asked them to just defer a year. And by being on campus, they've been able to do hands-on projects and make models, use the laser cutter, use the 3D printer, a CNC mill. The whole agenda of the first year is an introduction of manual and digital tools in a seamless way. And we've been able to do that. I'd also say we're all designers, and the students, the faculty, we're going to make the best of everything. It's been a positive attitude.
Well, we're approaching the time for Q&A, looking for a few questions as Marlene works to rejoin us here. I'm getting a notice that she's coming back in. But I wanted to thank everybody as you kind of navigated through this. We have had a couple of in and outs of audio, myself included. But I think one of the questions, unfortunately, I was going to ask this one to Marlene because it talks about higher education and how students can interact within that atmosphere, being a person of color, inner city, not having a certain pathway there. But I'll ask you this, Alicia, just because you actually made a pivot mid-career. What types of things do you think are going to continue to draw people of color that may not have the same backgrounds or exposure as we continue to work to give that to them, to the design field? And then what'll keep them there, right? I mean, I think maybe this is a question about what your experiences have been like with IBM or what your experiences have been like as a design professional. I know you're with AIGA in Austin. Just what has the professional work diversity looked like, and how has that impacted your level of comfort? Mm-hmm. And honestly, you're just feeling good about what you do. I mean, that's really what we're talking about, right? Is, as Marlene stated, a job that contributes to society and being in a place where you feel valued and welcome and honestly able to extend that welcome to others.
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to like the idea of what Carl was mentioning is like there's so many routes and paths to design. First, you have to figure out which one you want to go on. I mean, that's just the ultimate thing. And I hate to say like you have to pick one thing and move with it. That's not what I mean. It means like you have to have something to drive towards. And I think that's why design continues to be interesting, is because technology continues to advance. And as technology continues to advance, the idea of like, oh, I really want to do that becomes more prominent. I think for me, in regards to culture, it's also part of a journey to figure out what is it that you want in a company and an organization. For me personally, I like mentorship. I like the idea of people providing that insight and providing that assistance that sometimes you need in order to further your career. And I like collaborative work environments. COVID for me personally has been really hard because I thrive in an environment where I am surrounded by people and I'm able to have a whiteboard with sticky notes, and I have it's rare for me to be in a Zoom call. So the first part of COVID was really hard for me because I'm so used to face-to-face engagement. I think as a designer, you have to kind of figure out what it is that you want as a designer. What are you striving for? What have you seen or what have you heard that made you say, yeah, that's what I want to do? For me personally, I'm someone as a designer who gets easily bored. So I really like the idea of tapping into that kind of like, okay, this is complex enough that it's not going to take me a day to figure it out. That's like the 10,000 piece gradient jigsaw puzzle that you sometimes see. You're like, that's what I want to do. And for everyone, it's different. But I do believe there's some sense of like figuring out what it is in design you want to do. You can always pivot, right? Like you can always say, today I want to be a UX designer, and then tomorrow I want to do VR. That's totally great because technology will change and we have, as designers, have to change with it. But really focusing in on that skill set, I think is really important. You're on mute again. There you go.
Okay. Am I still muted?
No, I can hear you.
Okay. I was about to say the little green mic was up. So I wanted to make sure that I reached out to you all and extended a couple of the questions that I saw here, and I'll leave open to anyone, but it appears to say, what resources can be utilized to maintain a diverse enrollment, right? So throughout the educational track, how do we keep that diverse enrollment when they do have to balance the expenses of materials? They may be working a job, kind of like what we've talked about, and have other obligations. And I think, shifting things to in school has helped. but what things can we push, I guess, more into their overall networking experience? Carl, I think you kind of highlighted ways to really give them things that allow them to interact with their phones. They're mobile, they're able to do it in their neighborhood. But are there any other types of avenues and resources that you guys may think of or have experience with that would be really helpful in that aspect?
Well, I would like to say that, I still think that degrees are important, but I think a portfolio is more important. Companies like Google, Apple, they no longer require degrees. And so, that's why we open our Leadership Academy up to kids that aren't enrolled in college that are 18 and older. And that's why we'll pay them $250 just to spend 20 hours a month working to improve themselves. Because there are lots of opportunities out there. Many of these students have never really been engaged. And so to have them in that environment, and after a year or two, when they really start to get their feet, be grounded and be exposed, you just see them blossom. So I think that, as much benefit as our school systems provide for us, they're also broken. I hate to say that with other educators on the line, but they are in a lot of ways. And so I think it's important to provide access. You have to be able to be willing to look in other places. And I think that's also for employers as well, because there's talent everywhere. There's a guy by the name of Robert Smith. He's a billionaire, African-American man here in Austin. He has a private equity firm. He's found lots of folks. He's found people in construction that he's hired his private equity firm. He actually gives them an assessment, irrespective of what their profession is, that looks at, hey, what are their strengths, weaknesses, and aptitudes? And then he uses that to be able to say, hey, you would be a great asset. So I think it's important we still need to continue to cast that net and try and have more exposure. But we also have to continue to go outside of those traditional channels to cultivate more opportunity.
That's great. Marlene?
Yeah, I was just going to say, for those in school, internship jobs are so important. And I think we need the profession and also nonprofit organizations to broker the placement of interested students with interested firms. And right now it's so piecemeal. The students have to find their jobs. We're so busy running the school. Yes, we have a student services area. We try to help, yes. But it's not easy to place all these. And if we always knew, if every firm could commit always to a diversity internship, and it was just a very predictable, meaningful source of jobs, that's an enticement for students. Oh yeah, I could look at that because there's internships during school. And by the way, paid internships, not a chance to shadow. That is just, a chance to work for free. No, paid internships have to be meaningful. And I think that keeps young people in professions that otherwise, as you said, Ed, present obstacles. They're expensive. Maybe you can't see the payout in the long term. But short-term internships suddenly make boring schoolwork fascinating because you're out dealing with clients. I can't emphasize enough how important those are. And when we find out there's bad employers, we make sure we don't send them our important students.
No, that is valuable. I appreciate you saying that, Marlene. That's very strong. Really quick, I'm gonna try to squeeze in, maybe one or two more questions. So I'm gonna ask that the answers are a little more succinct. But one, and Marlene, this is one I was going to ask you before you dropped off. one question is, when we think about students of color and understanding their socioeconomic challenges and just their backgrounds as a whole, are there things that are being done at the faculty level and the staff level at higher education institutions to help them really understand those different dynamics than what may be from a student that has come from, a environment where they've had private school education, they've had some college credit and courses already? Are those things that are happening and occurring right now?
I can just say yes. There's a lot of sensitivity to those kind of issues, and that we can't expect that everybody has equal access to broadband. We have to relax. We have to be flexible, compassionate. There's just a lot of empathy to the fact that we're not completely on a playing field in this environment. Our fundraising, and we have support mechanisms that aren't just scholarships. We just try to be as helpful as we can.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, and this kind of touches on what you already said, Marlene, but I'll look to you, Jill, and also Alicia and Carl really quickly. How do we recruit more of that corporate involvement? I mean, Marlene said it, we need more opportunities, more structure, more stability there. Jill, you've talked about how you've gotten very engaged, and firms do that. But what's kind of the incentive? I guess I'll make it much shorter. What's the incentive to get corporate partners to support these programs?
I think right now it's easy, since we've been around long enough. We can point to specific people and say, look, they went through this program. They're a rock star. This works. And so show them how, them participating in it really gives them early access to talented students that could one day then be rock stars at their company.
Oh, that's great. Paul, you were going to say something?
Well, yeah, there was a study that came out not too long ago, and it was something like $16 trillion have been lost due to racism. So it's just, if you want to win, right? I think you also have to, for us, it's showing that, yes, we can find and source even a high school student that you can work with that's going to provide value to your bottom line through employee engagement, and opportunities for them to give back. But also, we work with the fastest growing segments of the market. And so there's lots of insight, and man, there's just so much talent. And those success stories continue to go. So I think we've been making hey, it's a good thing to do argument for a long time. It's basically, hey, do you want to win? And when you posit that question that way, people will start to react differently.
No, I love that, Carl. And that's a very strong way to close us out for today. We're wrapping up on our time, but I would like to encourage each and every one of you to continue this conversation, continue these topics. They're very important. They're what we will build on to change our future. Connect with me and connect with all of our panelists via their websites and social media platforms. And please prepare to extend this conversation into part 2, which is already scheduled. It's slated for November the 13th at 1:30. And it'll be a product of the Austin Design Week. So thank you to those of you in Austin. Go the other UT, right? We often get called the other UT, so I always like to poke fun when I can there. Austin. But I would also like to invite those of you who have tuned in today to thank you again, but ask you to join us this evening as we celebrate the culmination of Nashville's Design Week. We have a closing event hosted by Rashad Rayford, aka Rashad the Poet. It begins at 5 o'clock Central Time, and it's sure to be a special experience. So I want to thank you all for the time. I've had the pleasure of interacting with these panelists. I hope you guys have had the same. And I look forward to the next time we can speak on topics such as this and celebrate design. Thank you all.
Oh, thank you, Ed. You were an excellent moderator. Thank you for your thoughtful questions. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, man.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great weekend.